Hi, welcome to Opera with a Side of Fries. I'm one of your co-hosts, Carl Tanner.
And I'm Warren Gratis. And
Go
today
ahead.
we have an incredible star with us. I mean, I think the level of our show has just jumped up an entire notch. Uh,
Absolutely.
and
You are
actually,
not kidding.
here is Frank Bazile here has joined
Hey,
us. Frank
Hey,
has
there's
joined
our
us
third
sir.
co-host, Frank Bazile.
just in time. Well, Frank, I was just about to introduce our incredible guest today. We have the legend. There's no other word. Legend, yes? I mean, we should use the legend. The legendary baritone, Sherrill Milnes, is with us today.
Legend in his own mind. Is that what you mean?
That's so not true. You're incredible. Incredible. Welcome.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for doing this. We've been in contact. You and I have been talking for about a week now, and going back and forth and trying to nail down the time. And finally, we got the time nailed down. And then we had technical glitches with not only Frank but getting everybody in. Skype. It's not a science, I don't think
Perfect
so,
world.
or it is a science that doesn't work. So,
In
but
another
anyway,
cell-
here we are.
We're just getting used to all of this because, as you well know, almost every program in Santa Fe and lots of things, symphony concerts, the Met, everything's closed.
Yep.
And we, the Voice Experience and Savannah Voice Festival, have decided to stay open, but safely. So it's all streaming, as you're doing, although it's video streaming.
And there's a learning curve there.
If I can do a little plug, starting
Please plug anything you'd like.
starting August 8th. August 8th is a Saturday, and this is all streaming on our website, savannahvoicefestival.org.
Okay.
savannahvoicefestival.org. And so every day, the 8th, the 9th, the 11th, the 12th, it's 30 to 45 minutes of show, various things. The first one is festival kickoff, fairy tales tonight, an evening with me. We have Mozart. We have washing hand segments. We have
Do they have master
interesting
classes?
stories. Hopefully interesting stories.
Are you
about
teaching them how to
various
sing?
of the past or names that we all know. And it's the 8th, the 9th, the 11th, the 12th, the 14th, the 15th, the 16th, the 18th, the 19th, 21st, and 22.
And where do they find that again? Cheryl, where do they find that? The link?
It's Savannah Voice Festival, spelled out, .org.
Okay.
It's where our major program, it's not our only program, but it's our major program. We also have programs in New York and in Florida and in Chicago. But Savannah is the biggest one, where we have sometimes we've had as many as 100 singers from all over the world. Obviously, a lot of Americans, but Portuguese and Greeks and Germans and Danish and Japanese and Chinese and all over the world. It's an international program. And we found that while I think this, while streaming is not as effective as live, it is better than zero. It's better than none.
Absolutely.
A lot of our singers from the past and new singers have come online, dare I use the word, begging us to do something. Well, hopefully we're doing more than something, and we're doing a lot of coaching, a lot of programs. My wife has staged, let's say, La Ci darem la mano, the Don Giovanni duet, which we all kind of know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's say the soprano's in Maine and the baritone is in Texas. How do you stage that?
That's some big hands.
That's hard.
That's a big
but
hand.
it's safe. It's safe. As you well know, singing, given this virus, in many ways is the most dangerous because we emit droplets, we emit a lot of humidity, and we breathe hard, Carl. When we had the fight, you remember the fight in Il Tabarro?
Il Tabarro, yeah.
I had to win. I should apologize. I had to win according to the plot. But
I got to say, you're strong as hell. And
he's a big man.
You grabbed me every night and threw me under the cloak, and I was like, damn, now I get to rest.
Well, it's supposed to be realistic, right?
Yeah.
Well, I've seen.
I don't think we ever sang it correctly. If you're doing a recording, which I did, you can sing it correctly. When you're actually fighting.
Well,
I have a question.
Oops.
Sure.
I have a podcast mic Would you prefer it, or is his sound okay?
He sounds fine, but if
Sounds
you want to
great.
feel more official, put the mic in front of him.
Yeah.
But that covers up your beautiful face. Don't do that.
We're joined by Cheryl's gorgeous wife, Maria Zuves, who is here with us. For those listening
Hi,
on
guys.
podcast,
Hello, Maria.
You know, it's been a long time since
it has.
guys.
I met you guys when I was 20. I just turned 20, so
That's right.
and you guys haven't changed. I always say I don't know. It seems like I'm getting older all the time, but you guys look fantastic, younger, I think.
Absolutely. And Sherrill, you
Filter on the computer.
A youth
Yeah.
filter.
yeah.
It's like an
Sure.
instant Facetune.
Frank,
Yeah,
you need to
to
push your
fix that.
computer. You need to, and you need to take your background.
How do
off.
I
And
take
Carl-
that back thing out? How do I
Carl,
take that
I was
back?
gonna say
Three dots,
I've
right?
seen Sherrill in a bathing suit, and I know he could kick your ass.
Oh,
There we go.
yes, I know he can.
You see me in a bathing suit?
Absolutely. When
Let
we were
me
in
tell you.
Israel,
I'm
at
officially leaving the room. So
the Sea of Galilee, Cheryl.
Great to
Oh,
see
the
you.
Sea of Galilee. I
right.
remember that. We're talking ancient history.
hey,
that
can
was
I
25
just ask,
years ago.
I was in a bikini that time. I think I was in a bikini?
I'm trying to control myself. Yes, you
my
probably were in a bikini.
So you two have all met Sherrill. I only met you, Sherrill. You wouldn't remember it from Adam, trust me. But I was a singer in the Air Force singing sergeants, and you sang the 4th of July with the National Symphony on the Mall, and we
Oh,
met
yes.
briefly way back then. And I was so impressed, and we had a
Well,
brief moment of hello. And
That was Rostropovich time. He knew none of the American peace.
I know, but you handled it beautifully.
His musicianship was great.
Well, I'll tell you how I met
He
Cheryl.
knew how these
Yeah,
pieces
and you know, I tell you, when I thought this is a big man. I mean, you're 6'2", 6'1". I mean,
less now. We all get shorter as we get older, but about 6'2", yeah.
yeah, big.
Cheryl was actually my teacher my first year in Israel when we the wonderful Israel Vocal Arts program. I don't know how Joan Dorneman, the wonderful prompter and coach, assistant conductor, she was able to bring the world's greatest talent together to teach singers. And I was lucky to be there when I was 20 years old. And so Cheryl was my teacher my first summer. And I'll never forget. I mean, I always made sure I was absolutely on time for every one of my lessons. But there was one lesson, Cheryl, where I showed up and you weren't there. And
Oops.
I was afraid that I was in the wrong place. And I came up to you and I apologized profusely later. I said, Maestro, I said, I must have come to the wrong place. And you said, no, I decided to have a romantic lunch with Maria because you guys had just met at the time. You guys were just dating. It was new. So you get, that was that. So, and I completely understood that.
So we were forgiven.
You were absolutely forgiven. For
You
that.
know, Sherrill, you and I have a little bit in common here. I was married to Celeste Holm.
Oh, you're the one
Yeah.
Carl
Yeah, I'm
was
the one.
talking about.
Yeah.
I have
And
a picture with her at the Players Club
I was,
with Gregory Peck.
yes. Oh, wonderful.
Peck's daughter was doing a documentary, and they went around the players, and there was what did they call it? A pipe night, where kind of a
That's right.
roast, a very loving roast.
Sure. Been
The
to
only
him.
time in my life, Gregory Peck, who was older than all of us,
Right.
well, lad, and he calls me lad.
You
Well,
were
I
just a
didn't laugh
boy,
at that.
of
I was
course.
thrilled, but he said, "Yeah, well, let me answer that question." At any rate, I remember her, of course, in movies, and the very famous person.
Oh,
So let's
sure.
hope-
Well, speaking of famous, I mean, when I was thinking, when Carl said you're coming on, I was thinking, you're the real first superstar, really. In the world of opera, you're a superstar, brother.
Yeah.
And I know what it's like to be committed, married, in love with a superstar, and you're out at dinner, and you really never have a moment alone because people are constantly coming up saying how much they appreciate you. Do you still get that all the time? I'm sure. And
Well, this may or may not be an interesting point. Tony Randall was a very close friend
he's a dear friend of mine too.
and a famous, famous guy.
Yeah.
However, Burt Lancaster, another level of fame,
Oh,
was
really?
also a friend, not as close as Tony's, but we got to know each other pretty well. Well, it was interesting. Go out to dinner with Tony.
Oh,
Few people would come up and say something to Tony Randall, and I was what do we call it? Duck soup. I was nowhere. But you talk about Burt Lancaster. He never went in the front door. He only went to restaurants where he knew the maitre d' or the owner or the manager.
right.
And had a baseball cap with the, well, you can't see this, well, you're not doing video here, but you know, baseball cap with the visor pulled down so it didn't look like him, and would always sit at a back table, because that kind of fame, he wouldn't have been able to eat.
Oh, of course, of
You know,
course.
just a line
Absolutely.
of people wanting autographs or something. Well, it was interesting. I was nowhere. I was, well, what's the phrase?
You were just beginning, I guess, a peon in this business at that time. Then?
Well,
Again,
well-
you can't have been nowhere. Listen, Tony knows talent, and I know when I did La Forza and Opera News said I was a cross between Giorgio Tozzi and Ezio Pinza. When Tony read that, and the next time I saw him at a restaurant, he jumped out of his seat, grabbed me by the hand, and started introducing me as the next Ezio Pinza. So he loved his talent, and I'm sure he touted you all over town. I
Well,
know
Maestro, I have a very funny
he
story
knew
to
a
tell
lot.
you.
Tony knew a lot.
I bet he did. I'm sure he just, probably bowed down to you. You're just such an amazing talent.
Well, Maestro, I have a very
He
funny
would
story to
give an
tell you.
arm. He'd given
What's
an
that?
arm to have sung in a career. He would have cut off an arm to have had
Absolutely.
a voice, and he studied voice. He knew a lot about museums, history, languages.
Was he a tenor?
Well, no.
Yeah.
So you're
He
saying
he could hold a note a long time. Remember when he did that on the
So-
Odd Couple? He had to hold a note, really.
right?
So
Baritone, you know, a wannabe baritone. Dare I say that?
Yeah.
Maestro,
even
I
get
have to
a
tell you
voice.
something.
Vocalized him and played the Permaggiunto.
So I want to tell you a little story, Maestro. So this
Okay.
was years ago, and I think you'll remember it, but I was at the very beginning of my career, and you and I think we were either slated to do tomorrow or it was right directly after tomorrow. And I think it was right after. And Pavarotti was doing Tosca at the Met, and you came to a rehearsal with Tony Randall, and Richard Leach was with you, or you had connected with Richard Leach. He was there, and Yogi Berra.
Oh,
Do you remember
That's a
Yogi?
That's a Molly.
sure.
tune.
Yogi
Okay.
loved opera.
You
So-
mean 90% take a left, the other
Yes, that's right.
half, or
So-
you come to a Y on the road, take it?
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
right.
yeah,
So the
Yogi
four
Berra.
of you
I love
were
you.
standing near the stage door, and I walked in, and you saw me, and you said, "Come here, come here, come here." And you said to Richard Leach, I had known Richard at the time because I had covered him for Carmen at the Met. And you introduced me to Tony Randall, and my mouth was wide open. The funniest part of the story was we sat down, and I sat down behind you. I just didn't feel like I belonged in this group. I sat down behind you guys, and we were in the first tier somewhere, and you wanted to be able to get out quickly, so you knew where to sit at the Met. And you said, "Carl," and you leaned over and you put your hand on my knee and you said, "You're coming with us. We're going to go back and see Luciano at the end of the first act. We only can do that then because he's going to be too crowded at the end of the show." So we head back and we go down the long highway and I'm walking way behind you guys. I'm trying not to run into Pavarotti, see Pavarotti. You did not know why. And I'll explain to you right now. So we get to his room, you knock on the door and you just open the door and go on in. I mean, because you guys were buddies. And everybody goes in, and I let the door slam, and I kind of hide behind I'm not inside the room. And then all of a sudden, I just hear the door open, and you said, "Come in here, come in here." So I was hoping not to see Pavarotti, but I wanted to see Pavarotti. I wanted to see, but I knew that he would not think favorably of me. And so
Why? Because you're a tenor?
no, because of what I'm about to tell you. So I walk in, and he's a big guy. He's sitting on the edge of that chair with his arms crossed like this. And I kind of peek around just with my side of my face around the edge of the wall, and he goes, "Vieni qui." And I walk in and I go, "Hello, Maestro." And he goes, "I know you." And I thought, oh, here's where the shit starts, where the shit hits the fan. And I said, "You do?" And he goes, "Yes, you sing for me 2 times." And the story is, I went to sing for Pavarotti in the Pavarotti competition. The first time I went and sang was in Philadelphia. And I walk out, and the lady goes, "Say your name, what you're going to sing, and what it's from. So I walk out and he goes, next. And I walk out and he goes, what is your name? And I said, hello, Maestro. My name's Carl Tanner. I'm going to sing Recondita Mania from Tosca. And he says, I know what it's from.
And
So
that
the
was
piano-
the big merit.
Yeah, exactly. So the piano starts, ding, 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 ding. Stop. I don't have all day. Ta taka taka ta 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 taka 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 ta. And so she's looking and she finds it and he starts in the microphone. And so she moves it. I sing. As soon as I hit the high note, he yells out, next. I walk off. 4 years later, he does the same thing. All of a sudden, I'm in the finals or the semifinals of the competition. I go out. I walk out. When he says my name, he remembers my name and he goes, Carl Tanner? And I walk out and I say, hello, Maestro. And he goes, what are you going to sing for me? And I said, and I was about to sing Cielo e Mar, but I looked at him and I said, Maestro, you know what? I'm going to sing Recondita Mania again for you. And you know it's from Tosca. And he says, whatever. So I sang, I got to the high note. He let the audience applaud and he says, shut up, not a concert. He goes, what do you think I'm going to say next? And I said, take care, Maestro, bye-bye. And I walk off. So we're at the Met not shortly after, and I'm standing in his dressing room. And he said, you sang 2 times for me. I said, yeah. And this is where it was amazing. He said, why? Perché? And I said, perché? And he said, yeah, you sing for me 2 times. Why? And I said, Maestro, I sang for you twice because, when I left the most important part of the stories, my father died the first night that I sang for him. My mother actually died the second night.
Oh, timing, horrible.
So my mother died, and I never got any further than the semifinals. Well, here we are standing in his dressing room, and I told him, and I said, Maestro, can I tell you a little story? And he said, what, do we have time? And then he says, oh, I'm Luciano. We have time. I'm Luciano Pavarotti. So I tell him the story about finding his greatest hits record in a garage sale. And he says, aspetta, and he says to Nicoletta, come si dice garage sale? Che garage sale? And she says, she's flea market. And he goes, go on. And I said, well, I found this. And he goes, aspetta, stop. He said, stop, wait. He said, I said, Maestro, when I saw this and I heard that voice for the Una Vertiva, I thought to myself, if I could have 1% of this voice. And he said, stop, impossible. And that's when you spoke up and said, Luciano, come on, this is a young kid here. And he said, my friend, I don't say impossible to him. I say impossible that Pavarotti's greatest hits be on sale at a garage sale. You came to my defense. You said, Luciano. And he said, and he clarified. And that was the greatest memory. My greatest memory of you is singing with you. My greatest honor of you is singing with you. My greatest memory is when you were about to beat his ass.
Well, I don't know if I was about to beat his ass, but here we are. We did a lot of stuff together. You know, the famous Lucia recording from London Decca with Sutherland Bunning conducting.
Yeah.
We actually recorded the very famous Lucia quintet because Bunning and Richard and Luciano got into some kind of a snit. I don't even know what it was, but Luciano didn't come to the session.
Uh-oh.
He tracked it later. You can't tell. You listen to it now and it's perfect. You can't tell. But we did the famous Lucia quintet, which does not exist, of course.
So you had to do the first part, just the solo. It was a solo for you.
Right. The duet, baritone, tenor.
Yeah, baritone tenor come into just do the solo.
Yeah, I did it by myself. Actually, the scene following the Wolfcraig scene is a baritone tenor scene.
He wasn't there for that either.
Orchestra and baritone by itself because he also didn't come to that track later.
Oh my God.
I sang an extra high note in the cadenza in order to force him to sing yet higher, which of course he did beautifully, and it's on the recording. There's another story about that Lucia. The morning of the big duet baritone soprano with Sutherland, of course. Bunning called me, like at 9 or 10 in the morning, and said, Sherrill, I recently discovered an original autograph from Donizetti, and that duet is up a whole step. Can we give it a try? Well, it changes the passaggio, you guys know what I mean by that, where you turn over, because instead of pages of D's, they're pages of E's.
Yeah.
A whole step higher.
That's a big step.
To him, because the end, is written D, and then you go to the G, high G, and you hold high G with the soprano. Well, that meant E natural to A, not A flat, but A. So I said, well, let's give it a try, Richard. If she's got a high E, I got a high A.
But didn't you record
recording a whole step higher?
But Sherrill, you're famous for recording. I think there's a couple times where you sing a B flat on a. I mean, you've done so many recordings, but was it a Rigoletto recording? I know you, or there's a recording where you definitely are recording. Everybody talks about the legendary B flat that Sherrill Milnes sings.
Well, I'm not sure which one they're talking about. I don't know that they're all legendary. First of all, you have to find a place where it fits.
Right.
You can't just
Right.
throw in a high note. Also, I didn't always have that note. A is the same. Those are high notes.
Your A flat and C po is legendary too. I mean, you just sing them forever. It seems like they come very natural to you, those top notes.
Well, that's part of the skill, is to make it look like it comes natural to you when you're working your tail off. That's why.
You hear that, kids? You hear that, kids?
Listen, Sherrill, I actually, when I first met Carl, I was 17. He was singing as a baritone. I thought he'd be the next Sherrill Milnes. I mean,
and I said, I want to be Sherrill Milnes.
We all want to be Sherrill Milnes. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, but you made it all seem so easy up there. You really did. So powerful.
Thank you very much. I told Tom Hampson and Dmitri Horostovsky when he was still alive, they were talking about some video things that I did with high notes. And I said, well, I made it as hard on my successors as I could.
You sure did.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
You
Well, I
definitely.
Probably the B flat they're talking about is in the very first album from Attila.
Mm-hmm.
Tutta Italia, what is it? Tutta Italia, I forget. Anyway, there's a high B flat instead of a low B flat, which I did. I made a mistake in the complete opera recording of Attila, which I did with Bergonzi and Dutch soprano, can't think of her name right off, but with Bergonzi. That phrase, you all heard it, better to ask forgiveness than permission.
That's right, of course.
It applies to everything. Well, I made a mistake because it was Lamberto Gardelli conducting, an old Italian. And I had recorded just the aria on my early album, and this was the whole opera. And I made the mistake by saying, Maestro, what about singing the high B flat at the end, if I get there and I can sing it? Well, I don't think he'd ever been asked that question before, because he said no, right off. Of course, it's not written. And most baritones don't have that note, nor did I have that note all the time. At any rate, I couldn't change it then because I'd asked for permission, not forgiveness. I remember at the Met used to do Sunday night benefit concerts, and I sang the aria from L'Encavallo, Zazza Pingola Zingara. Baritones kind of know that aria.
I'm sorry.
Zazza Pingola Zingara is L'Encavallo. At any rate, there's a place for a G, which I never did when I sang the piece. And Fausto Cleva was conducting, and I got there and I thought, this is show off time, and a G was doable. And I put an extra high note, a G, and then came down to the tonic. I mean, it fits harmonically, of course.
Yeah.
Well, the next morning, Fausto Cleva called me, and I was smarter then. You see, I didn't ask for permission. I asked for.
That's right.
I don't know. I made up something. I've sung it so often in concert with the high note that it just happened. I'm so sorry. I didn't know that you blah, 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 whatever. So what could he say? Forgiveness, not permission.
That's good advice. Very good advice. Do you still practice the violin and viola and all the other instruments you play?
Oh, I still have my old violin from, I don't know, 5th grade in grade school is when I started studying violin. And I still have it, but do I play often? No, of course not. I'm old. I'm old. Almost to put all you three guys together is my
Yeah,
age.
no. You know,
Not
I
quite,
played
but
violin for 11 years, and it sounds like 11 minutes.
Sounds
we all
like
started.
Sounds like 11 minutes. I never, I never really would practice. But I want to tell you one of my favorite videos of you. It's from the Tucker Gala with Giacomini singing
oh,
the
the
Si per cielo. Incredible.
well,
Usually it's the tenor, that gets the accolades in that duet, even though the baritone is just, killing himself too. But you just said, I'm going to hand it to this tenor. And that it's an amazing duet. It was incredible.
well, part of that's Verdi's fault, of course.
Yeah.
Verdi and Boito. It is a great duet, and with Giovanni Giacomini. Yeah, what was his first name? Wasn't Giovanni? What was it?
Giuseppe Giacomini.
What's his first name?
Giuseppe?
Yeah, Giuseppe Giacomini.
Yeah.
And there's a video with Placido from the whole show where I do the A. In fact, did I sing the A with him at the?
Yes, you did. Yeah,
Oh,
yes, you did.
I would always ask. In this case, I went against my own rule. I asked for permission from every Otello with whom I sang it, starting with Vickers. I didn't sing it with Delmonico, but Vickers, and then of course Placido, and many other secondary but good Otellos.
And tell us who said no.
They wanted me to sing the A with them at the end of the second act, and all said, "Oh, please."
Oh,
Well, I have to tell
sing
you.
it.
Yeah.
they probably
Because
didn't hear
Otello
that.
has tons more to do. And Iago, while there's a lot of time on stage and a lot of acting, vocally, it isn't so hard, the third and fourth act, as we know. And so every tenor would say, "Oh, please sing the A," because they all cracked a little bit. McCracken and,
It's the hardest part of the opera. You're exhausted, but for the tenor, you're dead by the time you get to that duet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
you've
it
got
chromatically
huge third act and fourth act to go yet.
Oh,
It's a real tour de force for the tenor.
But
That
it's
reminds
an
me-
emotional, it's an emotional mountain for the tenor to get to that duet. Once they're past it, it's that third
Carl.
and fourth act is big, but
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Oren has a question. I can see him trying to chime
I
in
was
here.
gonna
Yeah,
say,
go ahead.
It reminds me, I did a Lucia. We did a film of it, a San Francisco Lucia, and wonderful baritone. But every baritone, first aria, that last high G is a tough one after you sing the first aria. Yeah. So I tacit the whole thing at the end, and I sing the high G. And if you watch the movie, the camera is right on him, but it's my G that you hear. And it's a good G.
Who was the baritone? Do we dare say a name?
He's a great baritone. I'll leave it at that. He's a wonderful baritone, but
Got trash people.
I
Well, I
hope
would tell him, I'm sure.
he's appreciative that I sang a good G for him there, because it looks like it's coming right out of his mouth. So
what opera was that?
Lucia,
Lucia.
And who's the baritone?
Enrico.
You're smiling, right?
Enrico.
We're not supposed
Enrico
to.
Palazzo.
No, the character's Enrico. Let's leave it at
Hey,
that.
Sherrill, when you got to the Met, how was it with working with Robert Merrill? I mean, you being both baritones and really having that taking over the mantle, that baritonal role.
Yeah, how'd they
Well,
decide who was doing what?
Robert was a very kind soul.
Oh, very nice man. Yes.
Yes, very. And so, first of all, of course, we never sang in the same opera together.
Of course.
We sang all the same parts. Like
Exactly.
Well, how did they decide who was? I mean, when they started the calendar and they looked at it and they said, "What are we going to give Sherrill? What are we going to give Robert Merrill?" I mean, how did they? Did you guys flip a coin for some of the stuff?
Bob tended to have a certain 4, 5, 6 parts
Okay.
that he did across the board. Also, he was 15 to 20 years older than I am. Long
At
gone.
least.
All those guys were that much older. Richard was born in 1917, so that'd make him like 25, 28 years older than I was. Sang with Richard. I was lucky when I went to the Met. There was still Corelli, Bergonzi,
Hines.
Gedda, Hines, Tozzi, Siepi, all of the guns that are called the guns of the time.
We
And
just lost John McCurdy too a couple weeks ago, or a
John,
couple months
he
ago.
just passed away. Yeah,
I know. I miss him. Good man.
I want to ask a question, Sherrill. Do you see a big difference? I mean, you were in the golden age. I mean, those were really the great voices, and a lot of people say there just aren't those voices nowadays. Do you agree with that?
That's a hard question. First of all, just because the obvious picking favorites or not picking favorites. Right. One disadvantage that I have, I no longer live in New York. Mm-hmm. And so lots of the young singers I don't know. If they're not in the Tucker auditions, of which I was a founding member of the foundation, I don't know them at all. And even the auditions, you know, I hear somebody once.
Right.
ABA does a great job in Philadelphia. There's lots of graduates from there. So it seems, I have to say, it seems, to your question, it seems that the emphasis now is more on production than on sound.
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Yeah.
With sound.
Yeah.
Sound and colors and facial expressions. I was also lucky, I mean, I'm older, but I was lucky, I'm young enough that the filmings were starting then. Well, I've told this story more than once. I'm on, I don't know, 6 or 8, maybe even 10 different videos from the Met. But they would do what they called a scratch tape or a rehearsal for the cameras, which was simply the performance before the so-called real one. Well, I signed the papers to say, yes, I give you permission. There was some small money extra for that. But I included there, if I sign this, you have to show me, and I'll make myself available, you have to show me a copy of the scratch tape. You learn by looking at yourself. And if you see yourself, as I like to say, checking out and going out to lunch in your eyes, you fix that, because that's embarrassing. You know, you're not paying attention. You don't know what your colleagues are saying. You go back and you restudy, you retranslate, whatever. You rework it, and you're better than on the tape that, you know, that is sold on the commercial tape.
That's true.
I always looked at the scratch tape before the next performance.
But you were also really huge. Recordings were so prevalent when, right? I mean, you were also in the golden age of the recordings. I mean, so many of the great recordings. I mean, now it's a losing endeavor money-wise to make recordings. But when you did it, I guess it was still a big industry.
Oh, sure. They made a lot of money. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to take issue, but a lot of money. I think maybe Luciano and Placido made a lot of money. Maybe Leontine made a lot of money.
The producers is what I was referred to, Sherrill, because I don't think the artists ever saw much of the money.
Not a lot of money, but big time fame. And so you could say you could charge more because you were famous. In that regard, it earned you money, yes. But just straight royalties. I mean, I'm lucky. Placido, Leontine, and I were the RCA team for about 15 years or so. Everything that RCA did, I'm on it. Then I had a clause in my contract with RCA that if they weren't planning to do it, if they didn't have it on their books, I could record it for somebody else. So I recorded a lot with London Pavarotti, which was London Decca, of course.
Right.
In Kingsway Hall in London, different place, and a lot of recordings done there. So that made me, it was lucky for me. But the timing and all of that, life, you know, who knows why life deals with you exactly the way it does.
Yeah. Did you have to block out a certain amount of time every year from in order to do those recordings?
They were almost always in the summer.
Oh, okay.
June, July, August.
So that's perfect. So that's
always, because then the Met, you know, September through late May, even early June with the tour, the tour that they used to do. They don't do it anymore. I did a lot of those. You know, I sang 654 performances at the Met. There's I think they say 652, but there's a couple of them, and you'll
shortchanged you.
Take this out.
They don't want to pay you for those other
cover
two.
For the Amonasro. Well, the Amonasro showed up, but as you know, he's not late into the second act. He doesn't come on stage. So I was across the street at Fiorello's, you know, having dinner.
Oh, yeah.
And the Amonasro showed up. He was fine. They marked him there. then I got a call. Oops, he canceled, and I would run across. And there's 2 performances for which I'm not marked as singing them, when in fact I did, because the other guy showed up. And Amonastro, it's a big part, but it's short. It's short.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Maestro, I wanted to ask 2 real questions, quick questions. We have a segment called Stories from the Road. It's where we ask each guest to tell a funny story or something that not a lot of people would know that you found funny, that happened to you on the road. If you don't mind sharing that with us. And also, if you don't mind answering this question, what was your favorite house to sing in?
Well, let's do the second question first, because that's
Absolutely.
easy. We have to exclude the Metropolitan. I debuted in the old Met. I sang 19 performances in the old Met. So I'm old enough to say Lincoln Center is no longer the new Met.
Right.
For most people, that is the Met.
Right.
Metropolitan Opera. Vienna State Opera.
Mm.
I made my European debut there. Carl Böhm conducted it. I did, 60 performances there, quite a few. Okay, that's the answer to the second part. Vienna, as a city, as an opera house, great city.
Beautiful.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The first part of your question, well, I have to think, what's the easiest to tell? Because, you do thousands of performances, and there are things that happen. They simply do.
And
However,
it can be on the stage or off stage in the hotel, whatever.
Yeah.
no, I have the story. Doing Falstaff at City Opera, the last act, Mignon was Lady, what's her face? The mezzo, contralto. You can't think, what's her name?
Quickly.
Quickly, thank you, Dame Quickly. She comes on with a note, and she gives it to me. The ladies have made this note up. La mezzanotte ritornerò and something or other. I'll return at midnight, and he thinks he's going to get it on with all of these ladies, and of course it's a put on. However, one performance, she came in, her back to the audience, and she mouthed, which the radio audience can't see, of course, "I don't have the note. I don't have the note." I read her lips. And I'm thinking, what do you do with that? Because you're supposed to take it and read it.
Yeah.
So I pretended it was a microfilm or something, and I kind of went, eek. And then fortunately I knew it, although usually my pattern in opera, if it's a letter or a note that I'm supposed to be reading, I wanted it written out so I could in fact read it, even if I knew. Well, fortunately, I knew it well enough. And so I have this little thing, it's about a quarter of an inch square. And I'm pretending, "La mezzanotte ritornerò," and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was really angry at Mignon. She kept saying, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, sorry doesn't do it. You can't put your hand up to the audience and say, "Excuse me, folks, I'm going to go get the note."
Yeah.
I pretended, we pretended. But she'll never forget that. I will never forget that.
You told an amazing story, I remember, in Israel, about you were giving a lecture about marking and about why you should always sing out in rehearsals. And you told the story one time that you came to do a performance and you said you marked all the rehearsals, and then you got to the first performance, and because you had been marking all the rehearsals, you actually marked the first performance, almost a lot of it. You said I
think you made that up.
No, I'm telling you, you told that story. I remember that story.
That's funny.
I wasn't a big marker. Marking is...
No, but you were telling us not to mark. You were saying that's the reason not to mark.
Well, I guess so. I don't remember that particular story, although one has to be careful about marking. If everybody's marking, don't be the one who's singing out. It angers the rest of the cast. Or conversely, if they're singing out and you're marking and you're the only one, unless you're sick, then it's a different set of rules, if you want to say rules, different set of rules. But assuming normal health, sing. I mean, there's a story of Sly, that offbeat opera that kind of reestablished Jose Carrera's career. There's a baritone part, big baritone part. He's kind of a mini Scarpia. That was me. But in the first scene, It's what I call it a big small role, baritone. Well, it was an Italian guy in Barcelona at the Liceu. He marked all the time. He marked so much when I knew he was having vocal difficulties, but I was there as a member of the cast, not as a judge of how to run the company or anything of the sort. I was doing my stuff. He made a mistake. He marked all the time. I knew he was having trouble with the turn, with the passaggio, and that he was scared. Okay, I understood that. But you don't fix it by ducking and running, as I like to put it. You don't fix that. Well, the management got very nervous. They thought he wasn't going to be able to do it. They even brought an American singer who had just done it in Washington when Placido was the boss there. He had just done it and could walk on coal because it was the same production. It was Marta who was staging it. So it was the same production. The guy made a mistake on several fronts. First of all, in 3 weeks of rehearsal, you can be stronger. You can solve certain problems. You don't solve them by closing the door, by ducking and running, as I'm saying.
Good advice. Very good advice.
Yeah.
Right. And he had one act, a fair amount of singing, but then he was done. He wasn't in the rest of the opera. He made a terrible mistake by marking all the time. They almost fired him. So marking, that's a long discussion, which we will not have now.
How did his performances go?
A whole other kettle of fish.
No, but I mean, I remember Tito Capobianco, may he rest in peace. Tito was one of my first, when I was in the Pittsburgh Opera Center. He was.
Oh, were you? Good.
Yes. Tito, we were doing Così, and I was doing Alfonso, and he came in, and I have to sing there's an E or something at the end, and I was ducking it all the time. And Tito came in to one rehearsal, and I tried to sing it out, I guess, and it didn't come out well. And then I started marking it again, and he went to the conductor and to the music staff, and he said, I don't care what time of the day it is or what's going on, Oren, you have to make sure Oren sings that out every single time. And when we got to the performance, I wasn't afraid of it anymore, and I nailed it. So that was great, wonderful advice from Tito.
Yeah.
Well, Tito, I could talk about the Tito Capobianco, Titone, the augmentation in Italian, Titone. We did so many operas. I did so many operas for the first time with Tito. I mean, 20, 30 operas. I could rattle off things in Cincinnati, at the Colón in Buenos Aires, and in Chile, Santiago, and Pittsburgh, of course, tons of things. And the Simone at the Met, which was his major thing. He did Thais and Simone. Wonderful things. I mean, I could sing his praises forever, Capobianco.
Do you have a favorite role, Sherrill, that you sang that just fit you perfectly? I mean, everything that I've heard always sound like it fit you perfectly, but there must have been one that you really felt was your bread and butter.
Well, the long answer, but it's a more complete answer. The two bad guys, Scarpia and Iago. I probably did those more than any other roles, any other operas, more than 100, 150 or so of each. Giovanni, great. And without a sex appeal, Giovanni, you don't have an opera. He doesn't think the most.
Yeah.
The ladies and Ottavio and Leporello is actually the longest part. But without that center pin, Giovanni, you don't have an opera. Boccanegra, powerhouse. Not one of, in terms of the audience, not one of the audience's favorite Verdi operas, but a great piece. However, having said all that, Hamlet, Thomas, French. I did it, I've probably done it more often than anybody living, both in French and in English. With Fabrizio Milano in French, all over the place. With Tito in English, all over the place. Sung them both. It was interesting. Same music, of course. It's the same music. In French, it was a grand opera. French grand opera. Meyerbeer and all of these guys who wrote this wonderful things for the French National Theater, which was the major, in their time, the major opera house of the world was in Paris. wasn't Scala, and the Met didn't even exist.
Right.
1850s, 1860s, in there. In French, as I just said, a grand opera. In English, much more Shakespearean. So they were different experiences. And when I knew it, I no longer know it in French, certainly, I loved it. So my long-term answer, my long-winded answer would be Hamlet.
Okay, well now I have to ask the follow-up question. Was there a role that you did and you said, I'm not going to ever do this again? Because for me, I've done Zoroastro so many times, and I got to say, I just wasn't a good Zoroastro, and I there was a point where I finally said to my manager, stop getting these Zoroastros, because I don't want to do them anymore.
Although, dare I say, that's a different thing, because you're not a basso profondo.
Right, correct.
And Zoroastro, of all of the bass roles, is probably the lowest. That
Yeah.
In
Do the speaker.
What's his face in the abduction. At any rate, those very low, and that's not you. You're more Philip and the bass baritone, the Mephistopheles,
Exactly.
Faust, and so forth. Well, a role you know well. When I auditioned for the Met in the Fox Theater in Atlanta, Georgia, they were doing Samson and Delilah that night. And it was Bing and Bob Herman and Krawitz and all of his guys back then, before your time, all in the audience. They rolled an upright piano out on stage in the Samson and Delilah set, and I sang a couple of arias. And I was thrilled because Mr. Bing said, "Mr. Milnes, I think we would like you on the roster." If you didn't understand what I just said, I think we would like you on the roster.
Yeah, we got
a thrilling sentence to hear, of course. So I went down and talked to them, and I said, he mentioned a few roles, and I said, the only thing I would not like to do would be Mazzetto. Well, I had done some Giovanni's by then. I did a lot of Giovanni's. And of course, Giovanni wears the nicest clothes.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't think that will be a problem. They were not looking for Mazzettos. They were not looking for Marcellos. They were not looking for Chonards or Guglielmos or any of those guys. They were looking for the bombers.
Right.
I didn't know all this at the time, of course, but, Warren died March 4th, 1960. And apparently they were looking for a replacement all of that time. Cappuccilli came over, Bruzone came over, tons of Italians. I don't know why nothing took in terms of the management. They didn't keep them. They sent them back. And they were still looking. Bob was still doing, Robert was doing his stuff, and Matt, Cornell McNeil, they were already full-time. So they needed somebody else. And grazie a Dio, as it was my time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mazzetto would be the answer to your question.
Okay.
There you go.
In fact, I did it in Italian. I did
And
it.
that was my
years ago.
Mazzetto was actually my first large role at the Met. Well, larger size role at the Met. So actually my debut season. I actually debuted in something else, but Mazzetto was the first legitimate role.
It's a small big role.
Small big role. It was my first small big role at the Met, but yes.
Gents, we're getting close to our time here.
I'm
We're getting close to running out of time here. Do you gentlemen want to ask another question of our guest?
Where do you start? How many?
I know we need a 3-hour segment with this gentleman, so we're going to have you back on if you'll come back on.
Yeah,
well, it'd be a pleasure.
Where do you think? Actually, I would actually know. Where do you think the future of the opera world is at this point?
Boy,
good question.
You didn't.
Do you have a crystal ball?
Because I don't have an answer for that.
I mean, it certainly is not where it used to be. 70s, 80s, even 90s. So.
No, and people are, well, I said that before, they're more interested in great sets and effects. Movies. It's an upside and a downside of the movies because you can do almost anything you want, and television and all of this stuff. I'm going to change the subject, really not answer that question. I'll do what almost every politician does, not answer the question.
Deflect.
I have a Bachelor of Music Education and a Master of Music Education. I was going to teach. And as I'm fond of saying, I just took out 42 years to sing around the world, and now I'm teaching.
Beautiful.
And not, well, I was at Yale and at Northwestern, but now it's freelance. And our program in Savannah, Voice Experience, and the Savannah Voice Festival, I mentioned those podcasts early in our program today. And that I love teaching. I don't know if one has DNA for teaching. My mother was a teacher. You probably don't have identifiable DNA for teaching, but my whole career, whenever I would sing anywhere, I would offer master classes. First 5 or 10 years for nothing. Then
Well, I was going to say, you made yourself available to young singers. What was always amazing to me is that there you were at the top of the opera world, and yet you always made yourself accessible to young singers. And as a young
Always.
singer who benefited from that, I want to say thank you, because it was a huge influence on my life. But the fact that there was Sherrill Milnes, and he was one of the, he was just this down to earth guy who I really think some of the, when I think of, Sam Raimi, Sam also makes himself available, and Paul Pliszka makes himself available. People like that. I mean, what it does for young singers. And I think truly the great artists who are confident in what they do and satisfied with their career, I think they're the people who actually want to give back the most. So
Oren,
thank you.
I agree. And Oren, I was thinking about that earlier, just to interject, because this art form is really based on mentorship in many ways. It's something you pass down, the subtle nuances. Anybody that knew Lee Chabanese was constantly talking about working with the greatest conductors and the scores. Payback. Yes, exactly. So, who were your influences when you were a young man, deciding between being a musician or being an opera singer? What? I mean, I understand that you really had a lot of choices at what kind of propelled you, and who were your mentors that you leaned on and took from?
well, both voice teachers, Andrew White, a name that some people might remember, and Hermanus Bayer, Baer, at Northwestern. Boris Goldovsky, huge influence. Tanglewood. I was at Tanglewood when Munch, we're talking ancient history, when Munch was still the conductor of the Boston Symphony, before Leinsdorf. I got to know Mr. Leinsdorf very well in recordings. And he came, in 62, I think. So 1661, I was at Tanglewood. And back then, we're talking 6 and 8 weeks in that environment.
Intense.
And, the faculty was Bernstein, Copeland, and names like this, legendary names. This was faculty. So you're listening to people talk, watching them being inspired. It was very inspiring. And that's where I met Goldovsky. And subsequently, with his company, Everything in English, with his company sang over 300 performances over a 5-year period. In a way, Goldovsky's experience was my Fulbright, if you understand how I mean that. The Fulbright scholarships.
Sure.
They still have those. I don't think they do.
I don't think they do either. I hardly ever hear Tanglewood anymore, and it was like a huge thing back in the 60s, 70s, and
very much so. Yeah. And singing wise, of course, Robert Merrill, Leonard Warren, big influence. Leonard Warren. I learned, I wasn't a big coacher. That is, in Chicago, on the farm west of Chicago, there are coaches. I didn't know that word other than in sports. Well, coaches in sports, that's normal. But coaching in music started out as a New York phrase. Now international, of course, we say coaching. You need to coach that piece. Well, I guess I figured I know as much about music. Maybe my fingers aren't as good as a pianist, but I know as much about music as a lot of people. So I pay them for things I already know. So I learned, let's say, Trovatore in Cincinnati was my first Italian Trovatore. Way back. I learned it from recordings, and my mom, who was not an opera pianist, but was a pianist, would play it. And I'd listen to Warren and Merrill and Gobbi and all these great singers. And a different Fach, George London. In fact, I studied Giovanni with George London, spent a week with him, not 2 hours, but 3-4 hours, 5-6 days in a row.
Isn't that great?
a wonderful story about George, if we have a couple of more moments here. Working with him privately, then, unlike almost anybody else, he came to the Met sitting out in the audience, and it was the Antigenerale. Wasn't the final rehearsal, but we were in costume. It was a lighting rehearsal on stage. And at some point, I think it was maybe in the supper scene, the last scene of Giovanni, George is sitting out in the audience, and he yells up to the stage director, "There's not enough light on Mr. Milnes." And the stage director, who had the book, it was the old production. It was London's production, Sieppi's production. He said, "Well, that's exactly the light that you had when you did it, Mr. London." Well, most people would have shut their mouths. But George, to his everlasting credit, said, "That may be, but I didn't have some son of a bitch like me sitting out in the audience saying it's not enough." Yes, indeed.
That's right.
That's phenomenal.
That's wonderful. And he knew his craft.
He knew his craft, oh, indeed.
Well, Maestro, I want to thank you for coming on today. We really got to go, but I'm going to have you on again. We're going to have you
I
on
have
again.
so many more questions. I have so many more
Can you quickly tell us about your programs one more time and where people can find you, and if they want, if I'm going to give our email address at the end of this and take emails from anybody who would like to email us to forward on to you, if you don't mind. So just tell us your programs again.
Sure. Well, all events will stream for free on Savannah Voice Festival, spelled out, Savannah as in Savannah, Georgia, savannahvoicefestival.org. And there'll be a link. And these, well, I had mentioned this at the beginning, starting the 8th of August at about 7, I think everyone is about 7 o'clock in the evening. What we found especially interesting, the various singers doing fun stuff, Broadway, we've done parodies, changing the words on Broadway because they're not, they're copyrighted, so you can't just automatically do all the modern stuff. You can't do it. You can do Mozart, you can do Verdi, you can do Puccini. At any rate, while we are primarily an opera program, we do a lot of Broadway and a lot of sacred, Messiah, Elijah, the Requiems, and all of this stuff. I tell singers, this isn't exactly what you asked me, but I tell singers, you're not going to be hired for Carmen or Trovatore or Butterfly, but you may be hired for Haydn, the Lord Nelson Mass, or the Messiah, or the Brahms Requiem, or the Elijah. Or what these pieces you need to know. The Elijah, as you probably know, is a tour de force for the baritone. I mean, there's great stuff in the Elijah, and they should know. Even though I was not a bass, you would do a better Messiah than I did, but I sang the solos in the Messiah 100 times, and in the chorus 100 times. I loved it. So, unlike a lot of programs for the summer who have closed up, summer programs, workshops, including Santa Fe and Tanglewood and all the symphony things have closed up, we decided, because singers said, "Oh, please keep something open for us," we're doing all live streaming. And I mentioned this earlier, ensembles are hard. If your soprano is in Maine and the baritone is in Texas, how do you get them to come? Well, first of all, safety. And we have live streaming then starting Saturday, August 8th at 7 o'clock. And that's savannahvoicefestival.org. And there's 10 days or so, 12 days of these 45-minute programs with various singing, some fun stuff, certain jokes. We have hand washing segments, apropos of the pandemic.
Perfect.
Well, we will
We'll
definitely
talk
check that
about
out.
serious
That's
things.
beautiful.
We also talk about fun things, and it's free.
There you go.
Something we've gotten from our patrons in Savannah is, thank you so much to us. Thank you so much for not abandoning us.
Wow.
We were
Good.
very pleased with that response.
Well, there you go, everyone. Listen,
Thank you
go
so
to
much.
Savannah Voice Festival, did you say?
Exactly right.
SavannahVoiceFestival.org.
Right.
Check them out. And we are truly honored. And every time I get around you, I'm a little tingly because, I look real quickly.
You're a
real quickly,
baritone.
well, no, yeah. Look, I'm a true baritone at heart. I'm a baritone. Lucky to have on there. But let me tell you something. You used to do the Toyota commercials, correct? Is it Toyota or Honda?
Toyota.
Toyota.
Well,
That's when I
did
first
one
saw
on-
you.
One on camera. I did a lot of voiceovers. We haven't even gone
Oh,
there
sure.
Right.
with this,
Well,
because
I just
I'm
wanted
like-
to throw that out there. That's how far I go back because I'm older than these boys here. But anyway, that said, I want to thank
like
you. I
5
want to
months.
personally thank you on.
Thank you.
Cheryl, will you come back? Can we have your
I will indeed. Thank you very much.
We love
Listen
you.
to all the listeners and watchers out there on our new YouTube channel, Opera with the Side of Fries. If you want to email us, if you have any questions for the maestro, or you want us to forward your email on to him, email us at operawithfries@gmail.com. operawithfries@gmail.com with any questions, any comments, as long as they're polite. Because again, if they're not polite, I'm a former bounty hunter. I will track you down and find you. And thank you all for joining us today.
Much
on
love to
Opera with the
Maria.
Side of Fries.
Please give her our
Yes.
love.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Great
Cheryl.
pleasure.
Thanks, Maestro.
Take care now, you guys.
Bye.
Okay,
Ciao.
so long.
Bye, Maestro. See you later.
Okay, thank you.